Have you ever wondered how the course of history in Asia was altered by European imperialism? This question paves the way for an intriguing journey into the past, a journey to explore the profound impacts of European imperialism in China and India. It's a story of power, politics, and paradoxes that shaped these nations and, by extension, the modern world. Our narrative will follow a chronological progression of events to provide a comprehensive understanding of this significant historical phenomenon, from the first encounters to the height of imperialism, followed by resistance and revolutions, and finally, the end of imperialism and its enduring legacy. We will delve into each phase in detail. This exploration will not just be a recounting of the past, but a comparative analysis of colonial policies and their implications in both countries. So, without further ado, let's delve into the annals of history and explore the influence of European imperialism in China and India. To understand the full impact of European imperialism, we must first look at the early encounters between Europe and these Asian powers. The initial contact between Europe and China, as well as India, was primarily driven by trade. During the 15th and 16th centuries, European explorers set sail in search of new routes to the east. They were lured by the riches of the Orient, particularly spices, silk, and tea. In the process, they stumbled upon these two ancient civilizations with rich cultures and traditions. In China, the Portuguese were the first to arrive, establishing a foothold in Macau in the mid-16th century. The British followed suit a century later, setting up trading posts in Canton. The Chinese, however, were careful to restrict European influence, allowing them to trade only at designated ports and through a regulated system. In contrast, the initial encounters between Europe and India were a bit different. The Portuguese once again were the first to arrive, reaching the shores of Calicut in the late 15th century. However, the establishment of the British and Dutch East India Companies in the early 17th century marked a significant shift. These companies were not merely interested in trade, they were backed by their governments and had their own armies, showcasing a more aggressive approach towards establishing control. Over time, these initial encounters evolved into a complex web of trade relationships. The Europeans began to demand more concessions, and their ambitions gradually shifted from trade to territorial control. The establishment of the East India Companies was a crucial turning point. These companies, initially formed for trade, soon became the tools of imperialism. They began to exert political influence, laying the groundwork for the full-fledged colonization that was to follow. As we can see, these early encounters set the stage for the dramatic events that were to follow. These initial interactions, marked by trade relationships and the establishment of East India Companies, were the precursors to the age of European imperialism in Asia. The seeds of colonial ambitions were sown during these early encounters, which eventually led to an era of domination and control. Now, let's turn our attention to the height of European imperialism in China and India. The peak of European imperialism in these regions was characterized by significant economic, political, and social changes. In China, the infamous Opium Wars, fought between the mid to late 19th century, marked the zenith of European influence. British traders, eager to redress the trade imbalance with China, began importing opium from India, leading to widespread addiction and social disruption. When the Qing dynasty attempted to suppress the opium trade, Britain declared war, eventually forcing China to cede Hong Kong and grant extensive trade rights to various European powers. This period, known as the Century of Humiliation, saw China's sovereignty severely compromised. Simultaneously, across the Himalayas in India, the British Raj was in full swing. The British East India Company had effectively seized control of the Indian subcontinent by mid-18th century, exploiting its vast resources and labor force. The British introduced significant economic changes, including a shift towards cash crops and the establishment of railways and telegraph lines, fundamentally transforming India's agrarian economy. Politically, they centralized power, implemented English as the medium of instruction, and introduced Western legal codes. Socially, they attempted to reform Indian society according to their own Victorian values, often clashing with local customs and traditions. These changes were not without resistance. In India, the revolt of 1857, also known as the First War of Independence, was a significant pushback against British rule. While ultimately unsuccessful, it marked the beginning of a long struggle for independence. In China, the Boxer Rebellion of 1900 was a popular uprising against foreign influence, demonstrating the Chinese people's resentment towards the unequal treaties imposed upon them. These events marked a significant turning point, dramatically transforming the societies and economies of both China and India. The impacts of European imperialism during this period are still felt today, shaping the modern histories of these two great nations. However, imperialism did not go uncontested. Let's explore the resistance movements and revolutions that emerged in response. In China, one of the most significant resistance movements was the Boxer Rebellion that unfolded at the dawn of the 20th century. The Boxers, a secret society known as the Righteous and Harmonious Fists, led an uprising against foreign influence. The rebellion was fueled by frustrations over economic hardship, the erosion of traditional Chinese culture, and the perceived weakness of the Qing dynasty. The Boxers targeted foreign diplomats, missionaries, and Chinese Christians, leading to a brutal international intervention and the eventual end of the Qing dynasty. The Boxer Rebellion underscored the growing resentment against foreign dominance and set the stage for the revolutionary changes that would soon sweep across China. Meanwhile, in India, the Indian Rebellion of 1857 marked a significant turn of events. Often referred to as the First War of Independence, the rebellion was sparked by the use of greased cartridge papers by the British East India Company. The cartridges, rumored to be greased with cow and pig fat, were offensive to both Hindu and Muslim soldiers. The uprising was a violent and bloody affair, with widespread atrocities committed on both sides. It shook the foundations of the British Raj, leading to a major shift in how India was governed. The British Crown took over direct control from the East India Company, marking the beginning of the Raj era. These were not isolated incidents. From the Taiping Rebellion in China to the numerous uprisings in India, resistance was a recurring theme in the narrative of imperialism. These movements, fueled by a potent mix of cultural pride, religious fervor, and economic discontent, played a key role in challenging and eventually overturning the status quo. These revolutions played a crucial role in the eventual downfall of European imperialism in China and India. In the end, European imperialism could not sustain itself. Let's examine the end of this era and its lasting legacy. As the world emerged from the ashes of the Second World War, the age of European imperialism was drawing to a close. Europe, devastated by the war, no longer had the resources or the political will to maintain its overseas empires. This created a power vacuum that was quickly filled by local independence movements. In China, the end of European imperialism was marked by the establishment of the People's Republic of China in 1949. The Chinese Communist Party, led by Mao Zedong, rode a wave of populist support to power, promising to end foreign domination and to create a new China for the Chinese. In India, meanwhile, the independence movement was also gaining momentum. Led by figures such as Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, the Indian National Congress campaigned for freedom from British rule. Their non-violent resistance and civil disobedience inspired millions, and in 1947, India won its independence. But the end of European imperialism did not mean the end of its influence. The legacy of imperialism continues to shape the societies and the politics of China and India even today. In China, the Communist Party's rule is seen by some as a continuation of the imperial tradition, with its centralized power and control over every aspect of life. The economic reforms of the late 20th century, while bringing prosperity, have also brought inequality and corruption, issues that can be traced back to the unequal treaties of the imperial era. In India, the legacy of imperialism is more mixed. The British introduced democratic institutions, a legal system, and an educational system that have become integral parts of Indian society. But they also left behind deep-seated social divisions and economic disparities that continue to challenge India's development. So while the sun has set on the European empires in Asia, their shadows linger on. The struggle to fully overcome the legacy of imperialism continues as China and India chart their own paths in the 21st century. Even today, the legacy of European imperialism continues to shape the societies and politics of China and India. In the past 10 minutes, We have traveled through centuries of history exploring the rise and fall of European imperialism in China and India. We delved into the initial encounters when the European powers first set their sights on these rich and diverse lands. We witnessed the height of imperialism, where control was exerted through trade, treaties, and sometimes brute force. We also saw the brave resistance movements that sprung up in response, the sparks of revolution that ignited the fight for self-determination. Finally, we discussed the end of imperialism, the momentous shift in power dynamics, and the lasting legacies these colonial policies left behind. These stories of conquest, resistance, and liberation are more than just historical events. They're part of the shared human experience, shaping the world as we know it today. As we reflect on this history, we gain a deeper understanding of the complex and intertwined narratives of China, India, and Europe, a testament to the profound influence of the past on our present world.